The first integration is with a retail chain of more than 300 locations in the US. And that's, you're talking about, tens of thousands of users.
Hello everyone, this is Alexandre from Gains, and today I am with Fred, who is the CEO of Cere Network. How are you doing, Fred?
Good, good. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Let's get right into it. How would you explain what Cere does to, at a very high level, right? To someone
Mhm.
who's very new.
We are working on, I think, goes back to many, many years of experience in building application-based businesses. And before that, working on social media, before that, working on, gaming and enterprise and machine learning. It's really a series of experiences stacked together to get us to where we are. When we first started out, I think in 2019, we were incubated by Binance Labs. And at the time, what we really focused on was sort of a decentralized, Salesforce, if you will, which is the ability to make data much more accessible, much more interoperable, right? And to free the data basically from this sort of like, very siloed way of storing that information. So that's what we first started. And then now it's definitely evolved into a more decentralized version of Snowflake, which is, cloud data computing platform coupled with blockchain native features, right? That supports different ways of securing data and different ways of accessing this data platform. So the difference, I think, with our team versus most other team that you see in this space is that three of our leadership team have built venture-backed businesses before in Silicon Valley. And that is like, very little bit different, experience path and a little bit different sort of ethos where I think we look at our projects as something that we need to build into a successful business, right, as well as open source project. So we want to embrace sort of a decentralization ethos, but at the same time, we're people who have built real businesses before. So I would start with me. So I started, I was born in Beijing, but I moved to San Francisco when I was a kid, and I started working in Silicon Valley since 1997, mostly for Silicon Valley startups in the product and developer role for more than 10 years. And some of those businesses include enterprise, web authoring tool. I started building web authoring tools. This is before like even Adobe and Macromedia and those guys were doing it. And then I went into enterprise mobile platforms. And then I went into AI startup, and then I went into a big media platform startup, and then I went into early social network, which was Bebo here. It was acquired by AOL for almost $1 billion. And in fact, we have two other team members who are part of Bebo. So our co-founder, CTO Yan, he was there as well. So I was in charge of the media platform at Bebo, and which was big part of how it got acquired, big part of the reason it got acquired by AOL. Big part of our secret sauce comes from our experience, from our team. So we have guys like Prasanna, right? I've known him for almost 30 years. He used to run a Sequoia-backed enterprise startup with my brother. We also have Kenzie here, who was not only one of the prolific investors and connectors in the blockchain space, he was the GM of Huobi in the US. He also ran and built NEA, which is one of the biggest VCs in Silicon Valley-backed marketing tech company. And then also we have some amazing advisors here, like Rajani, who was this first COO of Salesforce for 14 years. We have weekly calls with her, and also folks like Brad, who was the chairman of Blind Bike. He was the GM of Tencent, right? He was on the board of my gaming company. So someone I've known for a long time, not only an early investor, but one of the incredible entrepreneurs. He raised $1 billion from Blind Bike, right? So a lot of really good people behind it. So I think I can go into why we're building what we're building. I think this is kind of the problem set that we see out there. This is what really got us excited, which is, there is a natural evolution. I think that's the next wave of cloud data innovations is to move away from all these big tech players, right? Where by design, there's very much a conflict of interest where, they want to hold on to your data. They want to charge you more and more for you to use that data. We're introducing solutions and applications that locked into their walled garden, right? Locked into their ecosystem. And what we set out to do, which is every brand or every enterprise is really trying to focus on building their own data ecosystem, meaning that developers, partners, vendors can directly integrate into that You give them a sort of a solid platform, and then all the tool sets that are very modular that kind of like stack onto top of that. That is effectively what we have built. The base layer of that is our data network, which I can talk about a little bit here. So the biggest difference, right? So this is kind of a smart data cloud architecture where it's designed to be much more efficient than your typical, let's say, SAPs or Salesforce, products that were, designed or architected over 20 years ago, that doesn't have the type of high customization and also more efficiency that's, you're seeing as some of the, native cloud solutions. Blockchain technology is good for a few things, right? It's not good for everything. It's good for identity extraction. It's good for micropayments or microtransactions. And it's good for asymmetrical encryption, in this case, data encryption. So what that means is, I think the lowest part of this framework, this is the biggest difference, right? Compared to most of the data lakes that's out there, which are, again, built in a different era, right? Not built natively into sort of 2021 post-COVID and also privacy first type of approach. So how we onboard most data is that we're sort of have a SDK that directly plug into most of the applications out there, focusing on applications that already have millions of users or billions of existing loyal users, right? And then we onboard the data in a way that that data that we collect, let's say, whenever you log into, say, your trading app, right? Your finance app or say your banking app, or like say your travel app, the sessions we're collecting that data from, we capture that data sort of into these individually segmented sort of customer journeys, right? So that means that data is fully encrypted with user keys and application keys. That allows a much more granular way of extracting that data and sharing that data upstream in more customizable virtual data sets. And two is that, you remove the personal information from this whole picture. All the data that we collect are fully encrypted. We only host the public keys, everything addressed to the public keys. It's kind of like removing that whole, like say, cookie debacle, right? You move everything secure, move everything, server side. But the most amazing part of this is the asymmetrical data encryption, which means that you can allow any computing process upstream here to be granted sort of signatures to access certain subsets of the data that's extracted from here. Let's say any particular group of users that are relevant, and any only the data attributes or data fields, if you will, that are interesting, that are relevant for that type of data consumption with any of these computing services. So basically, you give people full control over data encryption, data re-encryption, and data access via asymmetrical data encryption. So that is the really exciting part of what we're working on. Before I go into use cases, I just want to talk about, okay, we really see ourselves as sort of the hub that really mirrors what Polkadot is already doing, but we're just more focused on enterprise use cases, right? And through the Polkadot interoperability bridges that's being built, all around with all the other networks, I think there's a lot of great use cases that we can do in the near future in terms of what we think of as the next evolution of DeFi, right? We call that SaaS DeFi. But the main idea, before I talk about use cases, is that for any of our current integrations, we're basically paving, what we call eating our own dog food, right? We're basically paving the process to make the integration to be as easy, as simple as possible. So we have these, turnkey private networks that allow us to work with any one of the enterprise partners, right? So the whole idea is that for any of our integration partners, how our typical integration works is that we have a sort of a turnkey solution or turnkey network that they can directly plug into. So they don't have to go through any of the sort of like challenges of having to understand and set up a blockchain network for themselves, right? And also that you don't even have to do that if you just want to use our decentralized data cloud, right? So the whole idea is that we have a wallet here that's used to collect both user data and also, the business data that's plugs right into our framework. And then also I think there is, a set of interoperability use cases I'll talk about, which is allows any of the B2B payments and B2C payments to be mapped over to DeFi, and I think that's a very exciting big opportunity. But again, I think the main thing we're doing is in driving the integration ourselves. We're able to not only secure MSAs and SaaS contracts that will be providing sort of a utility to our network, but also we're providing sort of a native support for any other network in the Polkadot community, use our decentralized data cloud, and they can use directly plug into our SaaS and data marketplaces. And I think this kind of just illustrates that a little bit more. This is where the focus really is, which is our data marketplaces. And I can talk a little bit more about the SaaS DeFi, right? So if you look at some of the use cases that we're kind of stumbling into or dipping our toes into, both in B2B payment, B2C payments, I think there's a huge amount of potential in this. And this is something that we can actually materialize and bring to fruition very quickly. For example, any of the on-chain contracts that works with our sort of a workflow, like say in a simple escrow use cases, the money that's actually being held in the smart contract can and should immediately earn interest from the DeFi bridges, where it could be earning 5%, 6%, 8% from the different yield or staking pools, for example. And because this is an area of immense potential, if you really think about how much money is locked into invoices and account receivables, which on average takes 66 days, and every step of the way as money move from bank to bank, you have to pay transaction fees and the wiring fees, and and the money being held out of your hands, right? So this is an area of immense potential, and also at the same time we see that this is what the DeFi arena really needs, right? So additional source of enterprise and SaaS utility and revenue that comes into the whole DeFi realm. So I think that's kind of explains what some of the key differences with our framework and by design. And yes, we do have a kind of a little bit of a SaaS initiative, which is mostly focused on consumer enterprises, mostly focused on the use cases that we briefly discussed before, that has to do with microtransactions, that has to do with smart customer engagement, or machine learning and AI facilitated user interactions that requires way of capturing that data. That really you really need to have a system like one that we built to be able to do that.
How are you different from other data marketplaces that can also be powered by blockchain?
I think the key difference here is that we are focused on business needs and developer needs first, and we are focused on seeding our network with actual real consumer data, and we already are doing that. So the whole idea is that we know that the whole world is going to on demand, right? If you look at what's going on Upwork, on Fiverr, on these on-demand marketplaces, they're growing like 500 to 800% a year because of what's happening with COVID, right? And the biggest thing that we see as an opportunity is that we're already working with specific set of use cases in travel, in retail, and in media, where these type of businesses have very, very similar data need, but every business is different from the others. So we're just basically bucketing and sort of pre-sorting a lot of these use cases and also data patterns into these different buckets, and then so this way we can put in front of the right data analysts and data developers to be able to work on it efficiently. It's only when you have very concrete data and also clear definition of what needs to be done with that data.
Okay. What's the volume of data you currently have?
Yeah, we have 3 active integrations that's currently going on. They're in the different stages. The first integration is with a retail chain of more than 300 locations in the US, and that's you're talking about tens of thousands of users. We also have an integration that's ongoing with one of the biggest travel booking companies, and that is we actually have an MSA that allow us to work with 14 of their sub brands. The current use case, they used to have like more than 50 million of these what they call VIPs who travel a lot. But after COVID, a lot of that kind of gone away, right? So what they're really looking forward to do with our help, which is coming up very smart ways of engaging these users using very customized and personalized travel booking information, and anticipate what type of places they'll be going to, and looking at what type of offers and discounts and reward vouchers and reward points, can really incentivize these users, right? So that is one of the things that we're building with them, and that can scale up, all the way to 50 million. I can tell you a story of, everybody knows, okay, there's a guy at Zynga, which is a gaming company, who got fired from giving his friends like 1 million tokens in one of their premium games, right? This happened in, I think, like 2009. So with your traditional systems, where most of the businesses, it's really hard for them to externalize the important consumer interactions, right? And the best way to solve that issue, best way for a third party to be able to come in to do that is if you have a system like ours, which is, you have an individual ledger that can capture the important, data verifiers that, or hashes that connect to important test session data that was actually collected during these user interactions. And then that information is captured into our framework.
How will these companies who want access to this kind of data, will they need to pay in Cere tokens? Will they need to stake some tokens? Could you tell us more about the role of the token in the ecosystem?
We all know that, Ethereum as it's designed, it was very inspirational. It's also not very practical, where every single transaction has a fee attached to it, right? There's gas, you have to figure out, okay, how much gas do we put in? That just doesn't work for enterprise, right? So the biggest difference, I think, with us and other networks, so definitely we have proof of stake fully working on our test net, right? Which is, we're basically have a lot of external, test developers who are already signed up to work with us to test that. So that is like one of the areas, and of course online governance, right? All of this stuff is what we are kind of inheriting from Substrate and Polkadot, but where we really are innovating, which is, the mapping sort of like SaaS utility and mapping SaaS data and requirements onto our network. Basically, we built this sort of like, smart data cloud that works, with our blockchain network. There will be two different sets of main utility that's driven by, different workflow and different sets of smart contracts. One is basically to the basic utility part, which is, capture data into our decentralized data cloud and then be able to extract that data using some of the tools that we provide in a way that's very similar to, say, Snowflake, right? There's no mystery there how that works. But there will be a second set, which is something that we're already have mapped out, which is, okay, I have, like say, for example, for a retailer customer, right? We have all these people who actually, we know these are the time that actually go into store because, we incentivize them to check in, right? We know these are the location they like to go to, or we know this is the frequency that they like to go to. So we can actually predict, when they will be going again next, and also what type of product they usually like, right? These are things that we actually map into smart offers. The whole idea is that, you want to give people the right tools and the right system and also the right incentives, right? So by taking our existing SaaS fees and mapping that, instead of paying, hiring developers ourselves and paying the salaries, we can make that to be available and also have some, developer bounty associated with it, right? In our open data marketplace. That is a huge multi-billion or maybe even $1 trillion vision, right?
Cool. Mm-hmm. Could you maybe tell us more on the crypto side? How are you with the product? What's your timeline for the launch of the marketplace? What's your timeline for the launch of the token?
So all of the operations of the decentralized data cloud are currently working with our testnet. We're actually in talks with a couple of public sell platforms to get that expedited, hopefully by, before end of the Q1, right? And then listings and whatnot, which we can't go into too much detail about, but all of that are planned. And immediately launch our alpha mainnet where, folks can start, playing with it, interacting with it, and we'll be, bringing more and more integrations into it. So that's definitely the plan for 2021.
Cool. Could you mention some of your biggest investors, because I noticed you have some very famous ones, and also maybe talk about how they help you out more than with money?
We have pretty much of all the major exchanges invested in our current or previous round, right? Or current rounds, or even before. So it's important to know that, and also there are a lot of value-add investors who can bring to us, sort of a very strong introductions, very strong sort of like, operational support. Say, for example, I say one of the top market making services, right? It's good to have those guys already partner with you, and whichever exchange you work with, they have preference for, who to work with, right? So it's good to have, these type of, support. And of course, people who are both, have both venture and blockchain background. It's important to have that. right? So because of that, we're talking to some pretty well known banks, where innovation heads of certain banks. We're talking to some of the biggest the big four consultancy folks who are already working with a number of enterprise use cases where they think we can come in and be helpful. And some of these are investors, right? They're that personally invested. So there's a really good alignment that we're created by attracting the right set of people who understands what we're trying to do, who are passionate about the vision that we're moving towards. So yeah, so we're very excited to have the kind of investors that we have.
Cool. Do you have three books that you'd like to recommend or share that really inspired you?
Yeah. So one of the books is, it's actually written by my father. He grew up in post World War II China and going through a very rough time, and he wrote a book called Love and Famine. It's available on, I think it's available on Amazon. I haven't looked, but you can Google it and perhaps find it. It's just really just kind of like talk about all of the hardships that he had to go endure, right? How bad things were, how much we take things for granted. That kind of like always helped me to stay grounded. And then the second book, I would say, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is written by Ben Horowitz, who is one of the first general partners of Andreessen, definitely one of the top tier VCs in Silicon Valley. And it's extremely good book, which really helped me to sort of like understand why it's so hard to be entrepreneur, and why it's so hard, and what are some of the things that you have to go through.
All right. Thanks a lot, Fred. Really was a pleasure. Where can we follow Cere quickly?
Yeah, so on just go to Cere.network. It's probably the easiest, and then where you can all see all of our social handles as well, or Twitter, Telegram, all that information. Just go to Cere.network.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed it. Guys, don't forget to leave a like, write a comment, tell us what you thought if you have any question for Fred, and on to the next one.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Alex.
See you.